The year was 642 AD and a son was born to Yasir and Khaira, both freed slaves of Medina. 9 years after the Prophet's death, Abu Sa'id ibn Abi Hasan Yasir al-Basri, often referred to as Hassan of Basra, was raised in the Prophet's family's inner circle. Hassan spent his childhood in Wadi al-Qurra near al-Madinah with his family. He managed to memorize the Quran before the age of 14. He also learned to read, write and do some maths. Hassan belonged to the second generation of Muslims who were collectively known as Tabi'un in Sunni Islam. Indeed, Hassan rose to become one of the most celebrated Tabi'in with an acclaimed scholarly career and even more remarkable posthumous legacy in Islamic scholarship. During the early days of Umayyad Caliphate, Hassan revered for his austerity and support for renunciation. He preached against worldliness and materialism. His passionate sermons leaving a deep impression on his contemporaries. His close relationship with several of Prophet Muhammad's most prominent companions only added to his reputation as a teacher and scholar of Islamic sciences. After the Battle of Siffin, which was the battle fought between Rashidun army of the 4th Caliph Ali and the Syrian forces of Muawiyah, both of whom being the famous companions of the Prophet himself, Hassan's family relocated to Basra. At that time, Basra functioned both as a commercial port and a military base. Military expeditions disembarked from Basra to the east, some of which Hassan participated in. As a clerk, he accompanied Rabi bin Ziyad, a commander of one of these expeditions. He also took part in another military mission to Kabul. Hassan met many of Prophet's companions, including 70 of those who fought in the Battle of Badr. The Battle of Badr was one of the earliest battles fought between the early Muslims and the non-Muslims of Mecca at that time. He grew into one of the most prominent figures of his generation, as I told you earlier. He was prominently famous for his outspoken condemnation of worldliness in high places, while the Mu'tazila theologians claim him as the founder of their movement because Amr ibn Ubaid and Wasil ibn Atta are among his pupils. He is regarded as one of the greatest saints or Sufis in the early Islamic Sufi movement. In 656 AD, Hassan moved to Basra, Iraq. When he was 15 years old, he began to learn jurisprudence, hadith and Arabic language from a large number of Prophet's companions who were living in Basra at that time. Hattan bin Abdullah al-Rashiki was his tutor for the recitation of Quran, while Ibn Surai at-Tamimi, the poet, was his tutor for the methodology of delivering sermons, religious speeches and recounting religious tales. Delivering sermons and recounting religious tales appealed to Al-Hassan, and he took a place in the mosque of Basra to teach people. Many storytellers back then tended to exaggerate the tales they told. Hence, they were all banned from telling religious tales in the mosque of Basra except Hassan, who adopted a different methodology. He used to talk about life after death, reminding people of death, drawing their attention to the religious and moral defects that they had and how they could overcome them according to what he learned from his teachers. Hassan acted as a qazi or an Islamic judge without pay for a while upon the request of the governor Suleiman ibn al-Harb. After quitting the job, he began to preach Muslims. In his preaching, he mostly underlined that a true Muslim should not only avoid sin but also stay in continuous anxiety against the fact that death was certain and nobody could be sure of their own destiny in the other world. This cautious mentality would lead to the foundation of asceticism and mysticism in Islam. Hassan al-Basri taught a large class in the mosque of Basra about the prophetic hadith, jurisprudence, Arabic language and many more. In addition, he held a special class in his home to teach people about asceticism. Hassan's sermons were instrumental in establishing him as one of the most prominent scholars in the field. In his sermon, Hassan warned his fellow citizens about the dangers of sin and urged them to live a more religious lifestyle. These sermons, of which only fragments have survived, are regarded as outstanding example of early Arabic prose. Some scholars have remarked on Hassan's vivid imagery on his work. From this story, you people can imagine that he had a natural talent for preaching. Though his sermons are not available in the text form today, authors of his time report that his style was a rhetoric masterpiece. He fluently spoke in philosophical depth. Some of his tropes and allusions are still remembered and used in the Sufi order. Hassan did not take part in Ibn Zubayr's revolt. In 700 AD, he joined the camp of Ibn al-Ashad during his revolt. Ibn Zubayr would finally be defeated by Abd al-Malik, who commissioned al-Hajjaj ibn al-Yusuf to reunite the Islamic Empire. Hajjaj defeated and killed Ibn al-Zubayr on the battlefield in 692 AD, beheading him and crucifying his body, and re-establishing the Umayyad control over the Islamic Empire. Hassan was on decent terms with Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. After the revolt, Hassan became a teacher in Basra and founded a school there. Among Hassan's most famous juristic students were Imam Ayyub al-Sakhtini and a very prominent saint, Farqad al-Sabakhi, an Armenian Christian who later converted to Islam. Hassan's attitude toward power was apolitical. He never supported the Umayyad dynasty, but he never took part in revolt against the Umayyad rule. On the other hand, he opposed them in certain situations. Hassan was frequently consulted by rulers and governors. He was particularly well known during the reign of Umayyad Caliph Muawiyah ibn Sufyan. Hassan lived in Iraq during the reign of Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, and he was a harsh critic of him and his policies. Hassan was a close friend to Umayyad Caliph Umar ibn Abdul Aziz and consulted him on matters pertaining to the administration of the Muslim state. In 720 AD, Hassan was appointed as the judge of Basra on a voluntary basis. Hassan offered an intense form of piety, stating that a true Muslim should avoid the color and taste of this world in order to reap the benefit of the other world. This otherworldly approach drew crowds to him. He was always emphasizing the importance of working toward the other world while doing nothing for this one. He lived what he preached, and it had a big impact on everyone around him. According to most historians and critics, Hassan was the founder of Islamic asceticism and mysticism, so the Sufis are correct to place him in their history. He was the link between Prophet's companion and the next generation. Although there are numerous explanations for the historical emergence of Sufism, the most popular and widely accepted story tells us that Ali ibn Abi Talib, the fourth caliph, and Abu Bakr al-Siddiq, the first caliph, were among the first Sufis, according to most of the scholars. All Sufi orders trace their lineage back to these companions and then to Prophet Muhammad himself, connecting them to various Sufi orders of their respective silsilas, a lineage, and ultimately to the Prophet. Hassan was a strong supporter of asceticism during its early stages. Today, Sufi admire Hassan for his asceticism, despite the fact that he predated Sufism as a self-aware movement. Hassan died on the 1st of Rajab, a Thursday night, in 728 AD. A large number of people attended his funeral. Now you have heard me saying the word Sufism or Sufis many times. Sufism is a very complex way of thinking, but for the sake of this video, I have simplified its fundamental ideas and basic terms. As I told you earlier, many people link the origin of Sufism to various major characters in the history of Islam, but however, a strong tradition links the growth of this movement to the Prophet through his cousin and son-in-law Ali ibn Abi Talib, the fourth caliph. Those abdications resulted in the greatest schism in the history of faith, the split between Shia and Sunnis. According to this version, after initiating Ali into the esoteric mystery, the Prophet bestowed upon him a cloak or a khirqa, imparting to him heavenly wisdom that transcends all formal learning. Ali invested his own initiates and the silsilas or chain of affiliation passed on the inner lore of mystical truth to succeeding generations of Sufis. Another prominent figure in early Sufism is the Persian convert Salman al-Farsi, who is said to have taken part in the siege of Medina. If any credit can be attached to this legend, Salman would certainly be the first Persian Muslim to become a Sufi. He was the forerunner of a great multitude of Persian Sufis. For those who are new to this subject of Sufism, I would like to tell you that Sufism is a name given to the Islamic mystical movement. A Sufi is a Muslim who devotes himself to the pursuit of mystical union, or more accurately, reunion with his creator or God. The name Sufi is Arabic in origin, derived from the word suf, meaning wool. The ascetic outlook and practice which are required for mystical communion characterize the lives of not only the Prophet Muhammad but also many of his early followers. Even when the rapid spread of Islam and the astonishing military conquest of neighboring ancient kingdoms brought unfathomable riches to the public exchequer, many of the new Commonwealth leading men resisted all temptations to abandon the austere life of desert, and their example was admired and emulated by multitude of lower ranks. Nevertheless, as time passed and Islam became increasingly secularized as a result of further victories and rapidly increasing statecraft complication, the original ascetic impulse tended to be overwhelmed. In the midst of worldly concern toward the end of 8th century AD, pious Muslims who remained faithful to the high ideals of its early founders of Sufism through all trials and temptation began to form themselves into small groups of mutual encouragement and pursuit of common aims. These men and women, as there were Sufi women too, who had a great role in teaching and spreading Islam in ancient lands, all of these people were opting out of the race for worldly advancement, began to wear wool to proclaim their otherworldliness, and hence were nicknamed Sufis. These circles of devotees appear simultaneously in various parts of Muslim empire. The characteristics of Sufism can be understood that in order to master one's desire, greed, fear, anger, jealousy, and constantly be God conscious, Sufis chant the kalima or invoke God, or have sama, that is aesthetic singing or dancing sessions. However, more important is to live a very tough life and sacrifice consumption of all that was considered unnecessary for their existence. The murshid or guide or teacher of Gudri thus wears a simple patched frock or a jubba. When a murid or disciple obtains the worn robe of the sheikh, which is the master or the Sufi master, he is expected to wear it without washing and should not give it to others. Hazrat Nizamuddin Auliya, a very famous Sufi in India, said something very important regarding to these robes or jubbas that the Sufi wear. He said these phrases: Tariqat ba joz o khidmat o khalq nist, ba tabish o sajda o dalak nist, meaning the Sufi path is nothing but service to humanity. It is not found in rosary or the prayer carpet and the dervish robes. Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi and other Sufi saints subscribe to the doctrine of Wahdatul Wujud, that means the unity of being or existence. This essentially emanates from the concept of Tawheed or unity and Wahadat or one. The concept of oneness of God translates into unity of all beings, whatever the color of their skin or physical features, race, tribe or ethnicity. They are all manifestations of God, and therefore all are to be embraced and seen as God's creation. None is stranger, alien or other. No culture, language, custom or tradition is alien or that of other. Not to accept this would mean denial of Tawheed or oneness of God. Those speaking a different language or who have different culture or physical bodily attributes are all creation of the same God. Sufis therefore always embrace all cultures and language and adopt them as a medium to transmit the message of God or Islam. The goal that Sufis strive to achieve is Suhl-e-kul, meaning complete or absolute peace. Peaceful and harmonious relation between all human beings entail peace between all religion and acceptance of diversity and interfaith dialogue. This goal is to be achieved by reorienting oneself toward equilibrium with people and nature and surrounding. There are two dimensions to reach Suhl-e-kul. The first one is when one continuously strives to acquire knowledge about people's behavior, culture, social tradition and custom. The second dimension is when one strives to develop love and compassion toward other people, which enables one to understand the context of the culture and social tradition and accept them if they are not contrary to or not forbidden by God. The principle of Suhl-e-kul discourages one to be judgmental about people and communities. This ability helps the Sufi practitioner grow in his or her spiritual relationship with God. There are many subtopics within this great topic of Sufism, which is sometimes hard to understand. But for the sake of this video, I will simplify them for you people to understand. Sufism is divided into 4 spiritual paths. The 4 stages in Sufism is Sharia, the esoteric path or the religious rules set by the ulama or the scholars. The another one is the tariqa or the tariqat, the esoteric path. The third one is Hakika or the Hakikat, which is the mystical part. And the final one is Marifa or Marifat, the final mystical knowledge. As I told you, often many scholars claim that all these paths are not different but a part of the first path, that is Sharia. They say that without following the first path, a person cannot be a Sufi. Hence, to be a Sufi, a person must follow the rule or path of Sharia, which is then followed by Tariqat and then Hakikat and the Marifat. These paths can also be called as different levels of closeness to God. Many prominent Sufis have claimed to reach the level of Marifa, including the most known Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, Sayyid Ahmad Kabir al-Rifai and many other known Sufis. A person who has reached these levels of closeness with God is referred to as a wali. Wali or waliullah means a friend of God or a person whom God loves the most. Under the Sufi tradition, the concept of spiritual position and the scope of operation has been propounded for the functioning of the system. The position of a Sufi or a wali can be assumed only by those whose lineage come from Prophet's grandsons Hassan and Hussein, and then ultimately again merge with Prophet's lineage through Ali, his cousin, and Fatima, his daughter. Among these, the Ghaus, meaning the helper, is the supreme position. Under him comes the Qutb, which literally means the axial pole. However, in some places, the Ghaus and the Qutbs are considered equal. Then comes the 3 Nukabas or Nikbas, the leaders. Then the 5 Amnas. They are followed by the 7 Autas or Abrars, which means the stakes or props of faith. Then comes the 40 Abdals or the substitute. Lastly, there are 300 Aikhars. Everyone's jurisdiction, authority and power were different in the order, and no one is allowed to encroach on the other's territory. After the demise of a wali or a Sufi of the upper rank, a Sufi from the lower rank gets promoted and the subsequent vacancy are filled thus. At the end, the essence of Hassan's message was otherworldliness, abstinence, poverty and reverential fear of God. Though he also spoke of God's knowledge and love, which he contrasted with worldly love and knowledge, Sufi Islam is a human-centric, tolerant, accepting plurality of culture and ways of worship that mold every individual into insan-e-kamil or a perfect human being through the path of love of God, while accepting all creation and appreciating the diversity in the world. Sufism believes that peace with all, or Suhl-e-kul, unity of existence, or Wahdatul Wujud, is a liberating resource to build a peaceful world.